my favorite subject, butts. And that may sound nuts to you. And my wife thinks it is, for sure. But what I'd like to talk about is an issue that, as a physician, has come to be interesting to me as an avenue by which we can get after the tobacco problem. And tobacco, I don't want to be preaching here, but it's still the single most important preventable cause of death in this country. 1 out of 20 deaths is caused by cigarette smoking. So this has been a topic of concern for me as a practicing physician, as an epidemiologist and a public health doctor for my entire career. And this butts issue is one way of looking at it and perhaps doing something about it, because it involves getting other people excited about the issue who might not normally be excited about public health work. And that means the environmental community. And so I'm very pleased to be able to come here and talk with you about this issue and see if it doesn't ring true or resonate with you in some way. And you have the good pictures up there, Sherry, that really do illustrate what happens. And probably many of you will now look around and see the cigarette butts laying around and think, well, I wonder what we can do about that. So let's see what we can do about that. Well, anyway, let me just give you a brief overview. We're going to talk about the science a little bit, about the possible remedies, and about the need for some interesting partnerships. It's a bigger problem than you think. Now, I was looking at some of the data back there on the signs, and it showed something about the cigarette butts and the beach cleanups, but globally, it's the #1 single picked up item on beach cleanups around the world, and also in urban environments too. And it's at least 1/3 of all the items by, not by weight, but by count. So that's a lot. And the other point is that there's a lot of cigarettes consumed globally every year, and most of them are filtered, meaning filtered with a plastic cellulose acetate non-biodegradable device that has absolutely no health benefit whatsoever. It's a marketing tool, and I'll talk more about that. Anyway, they're dumped somewhere, whether it's in a landfill or whether it's on the beach or whether it's on the sidewalk next to your car. Somewhere these things end up. And they've been that way since they started doing beach cleanups, #1. Anyway, here's a little chart just showing that this is the Ocean Conservancy's top 10 items picked up over 25 years. And you can see that's thousands and millions of them compared to everything else. Now, by weight, that's not going to be nearly as much, but nevertheless, it's sort of it's kind of like the canary in the mine. It's an indicator of how we don't take care of our natural environment. Well, do they do anything bad? Well, tobacco contains 4,500 chemicals, about 50 of which are carcinogens. They leach out. It's kind of like it's like a tea bag, basically the cigarette butt, and they can contaminate the sediment. They might infect bottom-feeding fish, seabirds. We don't know for sure. We've got to do some more research on this, and I'll talk about that. But when we have done some research, we found that they are toxic. This definitely water fleas and other microscopic organisms are definitely affected by them and have been found to be lethal to them when soaked in water. And then just in the general environmental degradation, looking down and see the piles of cigarette butts, it's like the broken window phenomenon in neighborhoods. If a broken window is there, it tends to breed more sort of degradement. Anyway, there's a cost to this, because usually this is not something that's borne by the smoker, who is the cause of it, or at least the source of it. So it's an externality. It starts to become borne by the taxpayers and other people who are responsible for the cleanup. Well, they look like cotton, and many smokers still think that they're biodegradable, although national surveys recently, we've actually had some national surveys to see what people think about their littering, and most people realize that they are not biodegradable, but yet they still throw them away because they don't feel like they have an alternative. They're specifically designed to accumulate particulates and compounds that are toxic. That doesn't mean that they make it safer. It just means that they accumulate them as part of the smoking process. And the tobacco industry has known that cigarettes are not, filters are not safe for a long time. They're not, something that they think is a health device. In fact, we've looked at the secret tobacco industry documents, and they've known all along that there is no such thing as a safe cigarette. And that's been confirmed with a lot of other science. Well, the problem with the filter, besides that, is they make it easier for kids to start smoking because it makes it cooler and easier to inhale. And then it discourages adults from quitting because you think, well, I got a filter, and it's not going to be as bad as if I just smoke a regular old cigarette. Pardon me, not true. And there's a lot of them. And let me just go back here. And one thing I'd just like to point out here, this particular one, some of you may remember the Kent Micronite filter. Does anybody remember that? It's made out of asbestos. Oh, interestingly. Anyway, do kids, are these things dangerous? Well, yeah, there's a lot of ingestion. One of our research projects showed, we surveyed all of not surveyed, but we got data from all of the poison control centers, and there was, over a period of a few years, there was thousands of cases of kids reporting cigarette butt consumption. That's only the ones that have reported it. And there's been some cases where they've gotten toxicity from it, and other things are more anecdotal. Seabirds and turtles, they've been found to consume and found they've been finding butts in their guts. They may swell, causing some difficulty for ingestion of food. And even animal poison centers have reported a lot by dogs, cats, even one bird ate a butt and got reported to the animal poison control centers. So, some of that happens. But what's also happened is that we've had a lot of progress in banning smoking indoors, which means that people go outside to smoke. And that creates perhaps an unintended consequence. And here, the surf riders have put up butt receptacles on the beaches nearby. They're carried, as you pointed out, by stormwater directly into harbors and beaches. In San Diego is the same thing. We don't treat our stormwater. San Francisco actually treats its stormwater. This is outside one of the buildings where I used to work, and it's a butt receptacle, and people don't aim too well with these things. This is a TSA, uniform TSA official outside the San Diego airport within 20 feet of a doorway, which is illegal to smoke, away from the designated area, throwing his butt on the ground. You'd think that people who are responsible for enforcing the law would obey it a little bit better. Anyway, we did a little bit of work to see about the toxicity of cigarette butts, and a standard EPA test for toxicity used two fish, marine top smelt and the fathead minnow for freshwater. And this was meant to see whether or not the butt itself was toxic. And so one of my students did this and used smoked cigarette plus the filters, smoked without cigarettes without the tobacco remnant, unsmoked cigarette filters, just to see what would happen to the fish. In terms of their exposure, and this is kind of the way the experiment went with different dilutions of butts in water. This is done according to, an EPA protocol, and found that one cigarette butt in a liter of water kills half the fish that are exposed to it, which are both saltwater and freshwater fish. That's the lethal dose concentration, one cigarette butt in a liter of water. That's enough to call it a toxic waste product, which means that we think it could be or should be regulated as such. Now, there may be other effects. We don't know whether or not this sort of accumulated sort of exposure in water, maybe it does have some effects on humans. Maybe it has effects on fish, and maybe it bioaccumulates. We don't know. And these are some of the research that we're going to need to do with specific identification of the chemicals, and I had a wonderful day today talking with Birgit and some of the other folks at the lab, and you'll hear more about their work on the ability to identify some of these chemicals in either the leachates or in the stormwater runoff or in aquatic environments to see whether or not it's actually there. If we can find a biomarker that might allow us to see what's going on with it. Now, the industry has been worried about this connection between the anti-tobacco people and the Greens for a long time. And they have pretty much made the commitment not to ever question smoking or criticize smokers or worry, they're going to fight the fines and the fees for cleanup or the take-back laws or recyclability. And they have really worried about regulations making them responsible. And there's a principle that I'll explain to you called extended producer responsibility that we like to invoke in this because they have made the product, they've profited from it, and when used as directed, it becomes this pollutant. So what they've done, the tobacco industry, has been to accommodate smoking, hand out pocket ashtrays, provide outdoor ashtrays, receptacles, and sponsor anti-litter campaigns. Some of these have been advertising based, and this is from their secret tobacco documents. The R.J. Reynolds litter initiatives been talking about us, brainwashing the environmental people with this kind of propaganda. It is not the answer. What these things do is essentially blame the victim. That is, it's the smoker who's responsible for this product. Now, I'm not saying that they're not responsible, but the product itself is also part of the issue. Now, they've done a lot of other environmental stuff. They've invested heavily in environmental groups, the Nature Conservancy, National Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife Federation, and the Ocean Conservancy, which is the group that does do the beach cleanups every year. So they get money from the tobacco industry. And part of that is to keep them from going upstream instead of downstream, which is the tobacco industry's wish. Now, I know this sounds like a conspiracy theory, and I got to tell you, it is, because the tobacco industry has been convicted of organized crime violations by, lying to the public for decades about the safety of light and, filtered cigarettes, among other things, and nicotine addiction. And so they are not to be trusted, ever. And so they've done a lot. Like Keep America Beautiful is almost like, I would say, a subsidiary of Philip Morris in some ways. It's generous support for Philip Morris has made the Keep America Beautiful what it is. Anyway, here's this environmental principle that I wanted to make some points about: extended producer responsibility, which means that if it's invoked, the polluter, that is the producer, pays. There may be some responsibility for those who profit from tobacco sales, for instance, retailers, etc. And there may be some changes in the product that can redesign it to protect the environment. And that's where this banning filters goes. Now, so this is the definition, the EPR. It promotes the total life cycle environmental improvements of a product system by extending responsibilities to various parts of the entire life cycle, and especially to the take-back, recycling, and final disposal of the product. So somebody should be responsible. Now, in San Francisco, they did an interesting thing. After doing some litter audits, they calculated what the costs were to San Francisco for cleaning up butts. And that was an interesting, carefully done study. And they figured out that as a result of various estimations, and I won't go into the details on this, but if you're interested, I can provide you with the background. It came out to 22 cents a pack for every pack sold in the city. And this is after adjusting out for those brought in by tourists, etc. At any rate, that was something that they didn't put on as a litter fee onto every pack sold in the city. Now, we know that adding price to the package, the cost of cigarettes, reduces consumption. So that was good from the tobacco control standpoint. But this fee was then meant to go back into mitigation. It has to be as a fee and not a tax. As a fee, it must be applied to the program to mitigate the tobacco waste. So that's what it had to do. Now, Philip Morris sued the city, said, no, this is a tax. It's a tax. It's not a fee. It's a tax. The city fought it and won. So it is now in place. It was signed into law by the mayor, and it's the only city that I know of that has a litter fee attached to a cigarette sales. So in conclusion, what we're trying to show, and are pretty convinced, is that the butts are toxic, non-biodegradable waste, that the industry itself should assume responsibility for this, meaning we need to go back to them and get them to pay for it. Or we need to go back to them, make them change their product so that it doesn't pollute the environment as much as it does now. And that we need to involve local communities in terms of raising awareness about this issue and to come up with some more policy options. What we've been doing is a bunch of science. Now, I just gave Sherry a copy of this journal, which is a supplement to a journal that is on tobacco control, but it's all about butts. It's got all of this data and information that I just talked about. We had last year around Earth Day a national webinar about this issue, and had a chance to have national coverage of this. And then we've been organizing and supporting campus cleanups and community outreach, and Just recently, there was an initiative pushed forward by the Department of Health and Human Services to have all campus communities go smoke-free within 2 years, meaning no smoking on any college campus anywhere. And I think that's, perhaps some people will think that this is an infringement on rights, but college is a time when people acquire habits that last the rest of their life. Why on earth, especially in state-supported, taxpayer-supported colleges, would we want to support an adverse behavior that ends up costing everybody? And then we had recently had a state butt summit in California. The state health department has put a lot of effort into this issue, and we hope that it will continue. We've got some research funding now to look at this extended producer responsibility to see how we can get either through legislation or policy advocacy to change the perspective on butts and get the responsibility back where it belongs at the producer side. So anyway, here's our nonprofit corporation, SigWaste.org, that is also like you, a 501c3. These are a bunch of I'm not in here, by the way. These are a bunch of British surfers who put together this little sign. I don't know if you can read it there, no butts on the beach. But it's a very interesting perspective. We're right now developing a grant application to the National Institutes of Health to look more closely at all of the chemicals and markers and other kinds of things, and we hope perhaps there'll be an opportunity to collaborate with some of the folks here at the University of Alaska. So thank you very much.